Buckner Jr., I have crafted a brief documentary on the lives of George and Ellis Buckner, two of the original Florida Highwaymen based in Vero Beach, Florida. This documentary delves into the beginning of their journey as Florida Highwaymen, offering insights into their professional growth and dispelling myths surrounding this unique group. In this video, we'll explore the history of the Florida Highwaymen, shedding light on the 26 original members who embarked on the artistic journey. George and Ellis Buckner initiated their painting venture in 1970, driven by love for the outdoors, cultivating during their childhood fishing and hunting trips with their father. Initially, fruit pickers in the small town of Gifford, just north of Vero Beach, the Buckner brothers turned to painting as a means of expression. Their early experience picking fruit while financially modest laid the foundation for their artistic endeavors. Known for the mastery of color, lighting, moonlight, and sunset paintings, the Buckner brothers also gained recognition for their detailed depiction of Florida's royal poinciana or flamboyant trees, often noted for their three-dimensional effect. Before their artistic pursuit, both brothers dropped out of high school around 9th grade to work as fruit pickers. George showed an early interest in art, kick-started his painting journey with a $10 paint set during his late teenage years. Recognizing his brother's potential, he also provided Ellis with a paint set. Despite challenges, the Buckner brothers persisted in this artistic pursuit until their passing. Ellis in August of 1991 and George in December of 2002. Their contributions were acknowledged when, on March 24th, 2004, they were honored in the Florida Artists Hall of Fame, along with 26 other original Highwaymen. Stay tuned for the rest of this documentary, where we hear from other Highwaymen sharing their stories and journeys, as well as Florida Highwaymen. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of art, history, and
and I met my husband, who I had finished high school. He was still in high school. I met him in June of '59, and he was studying art then. So, and that's all he wanted to be. So when we married and built our house, I started painting with him. And a lot of the artists that you see here were salesmen for him or came to the house to paint. And from 1965 through his death in 1970, when he was killed at Eddie's Bar, August 9th in Fort Pierce, Florida. And then the Highwaymen sort of disbanded then because he was like the nucleus that kept them together. And then they had a resurgence. So, you know, a lot of people are painting now, which is a good thing for the state of Florida and for the nation also. Jim Finch, he was going around and he saw some of the art, and it was so many of the black artists back then because they were really painting during the Jim Crow era, where you would go to the professional buildings and, you know, try to sell your art, and they were able to be successful. So he coined the phrase the Highwaymen that really caught on, and it was like a collective group of black artists. So he really got them on the road, so everybody just, you know, that were painting then started painting it again. And it's great for black history, for the young people, and for the older people that even lived during that time, because it really depicts old Florida. And, you know, things have changed because it's gotten to be a little bit more concrete, and instead of the backwoods. But their paintings depict what it used to look like, and they are still keeping that alive for future generations to come. This is still old Florida here. This one, and the sky, if you notice, Florida skies is constantly changing. And I really love it when it gets the pinks and the blues when they're peeking through. So that's what I try to capture. And in the evening, the sunset is so gorgeous. To be able to capture a sunset is like a fleeing bird. It's in sight, and then the next moment is gone. And that's what I tried to do with this one. And I think I like to do the palm trees, where it seems as though the wind is blowing through the trees, because it's like I can hear it just whistling and moving constantly through the trees. And I find myself just totally watching the trees move, which is, you're trying to figure out which way they are going or what the trees are saying, because it seems as though it's speaking to you.
I was born in Greenville, Florida, 1950, and moved to Fort Pierce with my parents in 1955. And I started drawing at a very early age, and I actually sold my first painting in the 60s, I believe 1966.
How old were you? Remember?
16. That's when I got a driver's license, well, an operator's driver's license, and I was able to get a car. And once I got my car, and after school and on weekends, I would actually sell paintings. Well, at that time, they were done very fast, and I would do 3 paintings at a time, because I would put I would put 3 boards up, and actually, when I actually got them finished, I would have 3 finished at a time.
Okay.
Now I'll be lucky if I finish 1 in 3 days. I would drive to a location. If I seen a new business, a new building going up, a new business, I would just stop my car, get a few paintings in my hand, walk inside and ask, does anybody be interested in buying any paintings? And if they was, then sometime they would say, well, could you come back next week, or you come back on Friday, you know, and then I would write it down and try to make it back on Friday. That's if some of the other artists didn't beat me there first. This painting is a painting that was done in Okeechobee, and I believe that's done near the Fish Eating Creek area. And those are cypress head that's coming up into an oak hammock. That's the standard size that we used to do, that I used to paint all the time with 24 by 36s, but I could just paint them a lot faster than what I paint now. This particular piece of work has a lot of detail in it, and it's just got a lot of detail in it, and before they had detail but not as much as this got, so this has been fine-tuned, and it takes quite a while to do a piece this size. Now, that's a flowering tree, the jacaranda, and that's a painting that I created out of my mind. In fact, I know what the tree looked like, and then I just kind of created and put the scene together. A lot of the flowering trees that I do, I create a background and a scene for them. I know what the tree looked like, the characteristics of the tree, the color, so I just create the scene behind it. How would I describe my style? As being fine art, I guess. You know, don't paint as fast as I used to paint, and I've slowed down a lot. And a lot of my techniques have changed because I did a lot of reading and a lot of studying, and helped me to pinpoint some of the fine things I've done. And just constant repetition from that has helped me to fine-tune it down to what I've got now. I guess to the point now to where the recognition that we're getting makes me want to give something back and make sure that this legacy continue to go on. Well, I wouldn't say that there's one particular painting that I'm fond of, but there are particular scenes that I'm fond of, and I think it's the cypress scene that, because those trees are beginning to be extinct, and you can plant, replant oaks, you can replant pines, but cypress trees, it's very hard to replant those trees. So I consider myself recording nature, and I'm trying to get as many cypress trees painted as I can before they all gone, because once they're gone, they're gone. Yeah, I'm gonna be moving in the northern part of Florida, and that's a whole new territory there that I haven't painted yet. So I hope to do a lot of painting there, and also too, I hope to travel and out of the country, show in museums, and just, you know, try to take it on a level farther than what I'm doing now. I think art is very important because art touches and reaches everybody. I mean, everybody can recognize art, I mean, and everybody can come together on one common term because, you know, art is, I think it just pulls people together.
I was born and raised in Fort Pierce, Florida. I went to Lincoln Park in '62. Had some great, beautiful parents. They loved the outdoors, and that's why I started really got involved with the wildlife outdoors. I was about a grown man when I started painting, but I always did drawings. I was an artist in school because I did all the drawings. And then when I was about 25, my wife was one of the original, painted with her brother, Livingston Roberts, and then she started me to mess with that oil, and that's what happened. I couldn't do no oil on painting because I had to take my time to do and try to learn how to paint. I wasn't trying to paint a bunch of paintings. I was trying to paint what I see, and it take time. I had to look at some of the international artists like Robert Bateman and John C. Lester and Carl Bender, and there's a lot of real good artists that I bought books of and studied them, and that's how I learned how to paint. Yeah, well, my first love was the wild turkeys. I loved them wild turkeys. But as time go on, I started getting involved with the jetties and and the water in the Atlantic waters and the underwater, like the manatees and the bass. I had a bass. Where that bass at? That bass is soul, man. I like to paint a lot of different stuff. And make me feel like I'm doing something. Everybody paints landscapes and things, but I want to do something different. Do a lot of other different little things that make people more, appreciative of the art. It was a gentleman that owned a gallery in Lake Worth, and he wanted me to paint a black girl eating watermelon. So I went and I painted my daughter. He wanted me to have that black girl spitting them seeds all over the place. So I painted it the way I was raised up. This is the way I was taught. They were brought up to be decent, and that's why I painted it. And I say that turkey painting now. I do the clouds first, and I make sure it's right. And as I come down, everything. And then I started going out, look at the hammocks, and then I paint. Then I put a little piece in there and put the different things in different sections and different areas to give it that light. And then I put that light in there too. But I have to go out and see it, look at it. I like to take my time and do it right. I don't care what I'm painting. I like to study it. And go and spend time out around it. Whether it's the ocean or around the oak trees, moss. So I might take some of that and put it in the studio. I want to keep painting. I want to keep
particular types. Or
I want to keep creating outdoors paintings with wildlife. I did I want to do the snook chasing the mullets, just like that. It's very educational. 5 years or 100 years from now, it'll be a good study for someone else to see.
I was born in Sandersville, Georgia. My mother immediately moved to Wrightsville, the WRIGHTSville, Georgia. And at the age of 7, close to 8, we moved here to Florida, down to Fort Pierce. We moved the season because everybody said it was money growing on trees. And so everybody jumped up, not everybody, but quite a few people got up and left and come down. And so the money on the trees was the fruit, not the cash dollars. So they come down here, and this is where we've been ever since, down in Fort Pierce. Well, I was drawing all my life from a little girl, drawing, making our own toys and stuff like that. And the older I got, the first picture that I had drawn in school, my teacher took it. It was a class, and it was in science, I think, and the subject was the subject was like, it was in science, but anyway, when time for us to take our breaks, like some go play, use time wisely, section of time, everybody went outside, and I stayed inside and drew a thermometer. And I didn't know why the teacher kept looking at it, and she kept walking by looking, I guess, to see what I was doing. So when time for the classes to come back in, she took my thermometer, but I didn't think nothing else about it. And the next day she did put it on the bulletin board. So I consider that was my first art exhibit. So after that, rocked on, and the years went by. I got a teenager and whatever. I liked the painting. I used to love to look at Norman Rockwell. It was always looked like he was such a unique man. And but I really didn't know it was did with your own hands. I thought it was a machine or something. So I went on and started dabbling in paint. So after a period of time, I met a gentleman named Harold Newton. He had flames on the side of his car, and I thought that was unique. So one day I happened to see him sitting still up on Avenue D in 20th Street. And then I asked him about the flames on his car, and he said, "Oh, I did them." And I said, "Oh, you did?" He said, "Yeah." So, and then he showed me a painting inside the back seat of his car, And that's when I found out he was an artist, and I asked him what he showed me. So he said, yeah. So one day I went by Avenue Q and 17th Street, and he was out there in the yard painting. So I stopped by and watched him paint, and I got out the car, and then I asked him, what do you teach me? He said, yeah. So he had me to come back, and he tacked up an 18 by 24 board, Upson board, and I took it, and he mixed the paint for me and told me where to put it. And that's what I did. And he put 2 cold phasing palms in it. I guess that made the painting better. So that was the first actual painting that I did on instructions. The rest of the time I was on my own, you know. It was a challenge. The whole art life was a challenge, you know. You go in places where you're not welcome, you're not appreciated. Some people didn't talk to you like they, well, I guess they talked like they wanted to. But some would say yes, some would say no, and some was very nice. There was some time I go in the offices, and the gentleman in there said, well, I need to see my wife about it, or the woman said, well, I need to see my husband. Can you come to the house? Oh, yeah. So we got run on out there to the house, and they greeted me highly, you know, and they bought the painting that the gentleman liked or the one that the lady liked. So I didn't, I found there was as many sweet people out there as it was bitter. And I just thank God basically for the sweet ones, because everyone that bought a painting put bread on my table, kept shelter over my head, and in the midst of raising 7 children, single parent, they helped be a mom and daddy too for me. So I'm just more than grateful for those that did realize. And right now, those that did it then realize that they had a diamond in the rough, you know. But even right now, some tell me now, say, well, I had one, but so-and-so got it, I should go get it. And then I said, well, I had them in the yard sale, and I sold them. I got this for $5, and so many things going on. But and the ones that had them, that didn't keep them, they regretted it, you know. So it's been a process. It was an Upson board, and I had no idea about what was the purpose. All I know, it was cheap. You could get a 4x8 sheet of Upson board for $2.98, 78 cents, or something like that. A total of maybe $3.12 with tax. And it was more suitable for our pockets, for mine anyway. And so, but then there are times when you run out of this. When I ran out of it, I get the canvas, because that's what the artist on the other side of the track was using. And so I knew it was okay to use it. And what I did, when I used it, I didn't have to get all sticky with shellac. I didn't have to prime it. I didn't have to do anything. Just go to paint, you know. And sometimes if you're in a hurry, it's a quick way out, you know. So, but it's just, it was, the Upson board was cheaper, and we couldn't go around buying. Well, we didn't go around buying canvases, whether we had the money or not. I didn't. Being honest, it never fazed my mind that everybody asked me, how did this? It never fazed my mind. All I knew, it was survival. I was raising my kids, and as long as the guys didn't tackle me or anything, we all had a good understanding. And at the end of the day, of their time, you know, I didn't drink and smoke or nothing, so therefore we had separate leisures. But none of them never disrespected me in any way. And I thank God I could fight a little bit. And these are the same colors in the painting that Michelle Obama got. It was but I never even dreamed of nothing like this. I never even thought of nothing like this. And this gentleman come to my house with a personal invitation, him and 3 ladies, and I end up in, they asked me would I like to go, and I said, yeah, you know, and I think she took a picture of me when I was saying that my mouth was wide open, you know. But they had me flown up, and I gave her this painting. And all this big congregation of people, I don't know how many thousands of people was in there, she had the nerve to stand up and call my name out. And all those people, I felt like going up under the table, you know. But it was a beautiful thing, you know, like the people. And sometimes you never know that there are so many different people in the world that have beautiful personalities. And it just makes you feel like life is worth living, you know. I'll look. Sometimes I have to go back and look again. But I don't do any sketching, you know, because it's just a thing that have passed by whatever. I just get the bare board and the paint and start to work. And one thing I know that there have been times I've sat down and wanted to paint, but I didn't have anything in mind, and I go to mixing up some paint. I know it's always blues and grays and whatever in the sky. I said, okay, Lord, here it is. I'm here. It's up to you. Yes, yes. And when it come out, sometimes that'd be some of the best things I've done. And there are times now that I put a board up and I work on it. And I just leave it alone. I go back in there. Sometimes I've left one up for maybe 3 or 4 days. And when I go back and start to work and look like everything falls in line and it comes out to beauty. You know, they said beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, but it'd be beautiful in other people's eyes too. So I guess there's a lot of beholders. I can truly say that art is a mind soother. Art is, music is. I do all of those things, and I notice there have been times I sit down and I be a little lunchy and I start the painting and I have my food sitting there, and when I get the painting, I forget the food. The food is either cold or the drink is all the ice is thrown out the drink. So, and it's a thing where a lot of people's mind really could be soothed by art. And you don't have to be a Leonardo da Vinci or any of those. Just be yourself. Do the best you can. And be happy. You can be happy with yourself. Sometimes things are done that you never dreamed of. And
I'm here for this show that this is the first time I was ever invited to this area. I'm one of the original highwaymen from Gifford. Gifford is about 2 miles north of Vero Beach on the far east coast, southeast coast of Florida, 20 miles north of Fort Pierce. Okay, what I have here is original oil paintings. The ones that are framed are originals. Along with my originals, I have what I call my panoramic paintings. The panoramics are the ones where I get carried away sometime and paint the whole frame and everything. All right, I was inspired by the tourists who used to visit Vero Beach. Vero Beach is a tourist area, and the northerners would come down and they wanted to see Florida scenes. They didn't want to see the snow scenes, mountain and ice and snow. They wanted to see beaches, beautiful beaches, sunsets, coconut trees, and this is the type of scenery they like. So this is what kind of got me started painting this type of scenery. Well, this highway phenomenon is a wonderful thing in that I was able to get started early in life, starting back in 1966 when I got back out of the Army. And this idea of going from door to door. Well, this is what started the Highwaymen movement, going from door to door. I started back in '66, even though I have painted date back before that time, from high school and college. I would go from door to door selling paintings. I always kept a station wagon, and I would carry a load of paintings with me. I guess say 15 or 16 paintings everywhere I went. I would take a small painting with me and I would knock on the door and ask if anyone answered if they would be interested in original oil paintings, and a lot of times they would be. And I would invite them out to my car and I would show them from the tailgate, I would show them what type of paintings I had, and they would tell me to line up certain ones around the car. I would line up several paintings around the car, and they would tell me to bring this one. So bring these inside. I would take them inside and hold them up on the wall so they could see exactly where those paintings would be hung. And I always had a hammer with me, nail, and each painting was already corded. So if they wanted to see one in a certain wall, I would leave it there with them. I could hang it and leave it right there with them. And I can assure you that if I ever took paintings inside of a house, I always would sell 3 or 4 paintings.
my first experience with the Highwaymen, the actual guy that started the movement was my brother-in-law, Alfred Hair. I started doing the background in his paintings, like the skies and the water, in 1964. And about 67, I started learning how to paint the whole painting around 67. And from that point, I started painting for him, paintings. I was painting whole paintings for him. He had about 7 or 8 salesmen, and me and him and my sister, Doretha Hair, would do the paintings, and they would do the selling. That scene there is an Everglades scene, and if you ever been to Fort Pierce, back out west around the St. Lucie River, that scene is out there in the Everglades around there. And this scene here is an Indian River scene, where that inspired me, this Indian River scene, and it really inspired me to capture that scene. For years, you know, we painted without getting any kind of recognition because we was just basically trying to make ends meet and trying to make a living to stay off of the streets and things of that nature. Had no idea that it would one day, you know, be this big, but thank God. We made it to this point. And it just goes to say, hard work pays off.
Well, if you don't want to turn loose your money, don't talk to him about buying, because he got to sell it.
Everyone I spoke to before I met Al said, you're not going to believe this man's gift, that he can sell anything to anybody at any time effortlessly.
I used to have a saying that he was selling mosquito a jacket in the summertime.
Good morning. So my name is Al Black. I have some oil paintings. I want to know what you all be interested if it wouldn't take up too much of y'all's time.
With that pitch, Al Black traveled US 1, selling paintings from his 1962 blue and white Ford Galaxy. He was king of the road for the Highwaymen, African-American artists out of Fort Pierce who painted a vanishing Florida landscape anyone could afford.
So Al was selling for everybody. The only paintings he didn't sell was the ones you didn't give him.
His commission was 30% per painting. A signature-sized painting, 2 by 3 foot, sold for $25 in the 1960s. And he would take his third of that and be happy. And he would give the 2/3 to the artist, and they'd be delighted. But Al Black, being Al Black, might charge $50 for a painting and still give the artist the 2/3 of the $25 and pocket the rest, and hence generally make more than the painters would make.
But you can't fault a person. He was a salesman, and he wasn't cheating, so that was his game. Gain, not game. G-I-N-E.
I asked him if his friends taught him to paint. He said no, not at all. They wanted to keep him selling. Made sense. But he said he learned to paint by repairing the paintings that are left in his care for selling.
So carrying them around, they would get messed up. The paintings would get scarred, and I had to fix them. And after I learned how to mix everybody's colors, because by me being the salesman, I'm walking around watching the colors that they mix, and I can mix that color, and I would fix them. And so after I learned how to fix them and stuff, I started to paint myself. I can be down and out, feeling bad that morning. But if I can make it out to the paint where I painted, everything picks up and just come into me and make me feel real good.
The Orlando Sentinel had published an article about the Highwaymen, and in the article it said that this man who had written it had been following the Highwaymen, and he'd been following Al Black, and that indeed Al Black was his favorite. And his last encounter with him had been in the Port St. Lucie jail. So I called the patient into my office. And I had the article laying on my desk, and he looked at it, and he began telling me about this man that had written this article. And I said to him, I said, are you this Al Black? And he said, Doc, if you'll just let me paint, I'll show you.
I think I paint 2 or 3 paintings in 3 or 4 hours in here.
I would think you'd want to make it go slowly.
That's right. Well, I was limited in time. You know, I'd have to have an officer with me, you know, at the time when I was painting, till I got trustable, you know.
Was there any time, this may sound somewhat silly, during your 12 years when you actually got to see these places? Were you on any?
Well, I didn't need to see them anymore. They was in my mind. Yeah.
A lot of people buy paintings because it reminds them of the place they used to be or how it used to be.
The way I feel that if a person see a painting and they like it, there's a meaning to them, you know, there's a meaning to that painting. That painting will grow on you. If you buy a painting and you like it a little bit.
The murals he had painted throughout this prison. And they all kind of looked at me and smiled, and they said, don't believe a word the man tells you. And they were not being malicious. They were kind of laughing at me, sneering a little bit. So I went to meet Al. We spent 3 hours together, and I walked out of there. I believed every word he told me, and I still do. This is an incredible ability to convince people, and he softens them up, and he made his money. And as Roger pointed out, it was 30%. But often he would charge double the amount for a painting, and he would keep the 30% plus everything over the money that the painters were entitled to. And they knew that, and it was fine with them. So he was living a life of luxury very quickly as well. And in this prison, he painted 94 murals, and I documented each of them for the book I wrote about Al's journey. And Roger had pointed out that he learned to paint by fixing the paintings. These were oil paintings on board, and these guys didn't have time to let the oils dry. They were painting them at night and taking them out the next morning, and they would nest in the frames. They made their own frames so they would nest, and one would not scratch or lean up against the one behind it because they were all wet. But inevitably, one would smudge or get scratched. And Al started to paint by fixing them up and taught himself the rudimentary techniques that they used. And then he went at it as a full-fledged painter. And but he's a legend. He's the most colorful of the Highwaymen.
Gary and Roger, I was thinking from what you gentlemen have shared, you know, I'm thinking of some friends of mine in the modern and contemporary art galleries who could probably learn some lessons from Mr. Black. I mean, selling artwork is an art unto itself. We had a question. I thought this would be good timing. I mean, other than, again, some are realistic, some are more impressionist style coastal oil paintings, what are some other characteristics of Highwaymen paintings? Are they usually signed, for instance?
May I answer that quickly? Yes, they're all signed. Although Al Black told the painters for whom he was representing that if they didn't sign the painting, he can sign it in front of the prospective buyer to hasten the sale. So many paintings that Willie Daniels had painted are signed by Al Black. But any of us that look at their paintings long enough can tell you from across the room who painted which paintings. But generally 99% were signed by the artist. And usually with a lot of flair. But to answer your question, I think what we call their fast painting define their style. And they painted so fast that the images are primarily very gestural, very sketchy, and hence very suggestive. I think by painting fast, they stripped away the artifice by which professional artists made their name in their paintings to arrive at the archetype, the essentialness of the scenes that they had painted. They weren't embellished. They weren't carried away. They just painted quickly to get the basics down. And they arrived at their own style by painting quickly. And I forget, like Willie Daniels, who painted these pictures, was an incredibly gifted painter. And I think the most important in terms of exemplifying the Highwayman aesthetic. It doesn't fall prey to professional paintings of the era. There's something, I don't want to say funky, but something just uniquely their own, that dreamy postcards sent to the tropics. And I think people can just walk into their paintings because they're not quite as pretentious as they might be if they were more belabored. And people just connected viscerally with these paintings. And I saw somebody had asked how many paintings. The estimates are between 200,000 and 250,000 oil paintings. It's a phenomenal number. Now, they didn't keep inventories or records, so nobody's sure exactly how many paintings were created. But I know that the number is rather high.
Gary, this is secondary to the craftsmanship and the talent. But what I think is so wonderful are that the paintings are a snapshot. It's like a time capsule of 1950s, 1960s Florida.
Yeah, you're so right, Charles. They captured that mid-century spirit. And I think a lot of it had to do with during World War II, Florida was a huge military training camp from Key West to Jacksonville to Pensacola to Tampa to Orlando. There could have been 2 million people stationed in Florida. And I'm from Miami Beach. I grew up in South Beach. And I've seen postcards and photographs of young men training on Ocean Drive. It's about a 14-block span on the beach in January, without wearing shirts but having a gas mask on their face, doing calisthenics. If you are fortunate enough to survive the horrors of war, what do you come back remembering? You remember this paradise that you were stationed in called Florida. And it's no wonder that Florida and Southern California became the places to live the American dream. And they would come down here, and they might have been disillusioned when they found out about mosquitoes and cockroaches, but nevertheless, you hang one of these reports about the place and the incident I'm about to share with you. This was the place to be. It's Sunday night. There are 2 jukeboxes. Eddie's behind the bar, rolling his cigar from side to side. The place is packed with people smoking and enjoying the music and cavorting and spilling out onto the sidewalks. And this other man, Jules Funderburk, worked in the fields as a truck driver, and came up to Alfred and Livingston Roberts, Alfred's good friend and one of the key painters. And they were sort of, respectful, but not paying too much attention. And they noticed that Funderburk is getting a bit hot under the collar. And I'm talking about a girl, because Alfred was movie star handsome and charismatic in the best sense of the word. And they're talking and playing, and Livingston doesn't know why Funderburk is getting edgy and says, "You want some money? Here's some money." He throws him some money. He goes, "I don't want your money." And he walks out and he walks back with a gun. And sadly, he hits Livingston with the gun and turns around and he shoots Alfred in the chest. And Alfred goes out the side and comes back, where they wrestled, comes back in and goes to the front where his car was parked. And he's rushed to the hospital. Everybody's in shock, of course. And he dies en route to the hospital. Alfred was 29 years old, on top of his game, and the father of 6.
African-American artists who are world-renowned for their iconic Florida landscape paintings. Their style is recognized by their bright colors and impressionistic brushstrokes filled with Florida sunsets, waterscapes, and wilderness. Of the 26 original artists, Mary Ann Carroll was the only woman. Their art movement started in the 1950s during harsh Jim Crow laws and the civil rights movement, where they faced segregation in personal and professional life. Most of these artists had no professional training and were self-taught, but created a social group to support, learn, and teach their art form. Their original mentor was Albert Backus, who was an established white artist living in Fort Pierce, Florida, who had professional training at Parsons School of Design in New York City. The first person he mentored was Alfred Hair. Backus had grown up during the Depression and knew a bit about hardships himself, and wanted to help expand Hair's talents as an artist. Hair was a young high school student when they first met, but he quickly helped found this new movement. Soon others heard of the welcoming white painter who offered free art supplies and lessons from his studio. Hair saw an opportunity and invented a new business plan where he would bring in and train other black artists and friends to paint for a living. For many, this was a vocation they learned to bypass menial labor where they would only receive below average wages. Unfortunately, they were not always recognized for their talent during this difficult time of inequality. This was also a time where self-taught artists were seen as lower class and classified with derogatory terms such as outsider or naive. To remedy their rejection from professional galleries, the Highwaymen took their artwork along Florida's East Coast highways and sold paintings from the trunks of their cars. They would sell their paintings for an average of $25 each, whereas white artist counterparts could expect hundreds of dollars from similar paintings in galleries. But at the time, this was a good day's pay when minimum wage averaged about $1 an hour, or about $5 today. And if you were black, you weren't always guaranteed full minimum wage. The artists would use low-cost materials such as Epsom board, wood, or masonite, which were hardware materials instead of canvas. Epsom board, which is this here, is a pressed paperboard that was used like drywall in buildings. To keep the cost of framing down, they would make their own with crown molding. Instead of studios, they would paint in their homes or backyards, and often from memory instead of plein air or outdoors. Not only did they paint beautifully and creatively, they painted fast. The more paintings that they were able to create, the more they were able to sell. One quote from James Gibson shows a playful competition between himself and Alfred Hair. When Alfred made $125, I'd have to make $150. Then he'd have to make $200. When I painted half a day, he painted all day. Then I painted all night. They would set up easels in an assembly line and paint one color at a time over multiple paintings. They were using oil paint, which can often take months or years to dry, so they often sold their paintings still wet. But people couldn't get enough of them. Many tourists bought them as a token of their stay here, or businesses and hotels would decorate their rooms with them. But after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, they began being targeted for arrest more often for solicitation and curfew violations. Their group drifted apart by the 1980s when demand for their paintings declined and hardships stacked up. Many of the artists moved on to other professions during this time, even moving out of state. But their legacy lived on. They were prolific painters, creating over 200,000 paintings over time. They were showing up in flea markets and consignment shops or passed down through families, and someone began to take notice of the similar nature and skill to all of these paintings. In the winter 1993 issue of Art and Artists of Florida, a publication of the Florida Masters Collection, art historian Jim Fitch wrote an essay titled "In Search of a Tradition," highlighting the artists he named the Highwaymen for how they sold their paintings along the highways. They soon became known as the Florida Highwaymen in numerous newspaper articles not long after, and their popularity increased on a worldwide scale. They were finally becoming recognized for creating an entirely new art movement like the Impressionists or Surrealists, and it happened right here in Florida. Many of the Highwaymen moved back to Florida and went back to painting, but this time as gallery artists with skyrocketing sales at a new average of $500 to $10,000 per piece, with auction prices over $40,000. Their induction into the Florida Artists Hall of Fame in 2004 solidified their impact as one of the major contemporary art groups in the United States. In 2016, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture opened with 18 Highwaymen paintings in their collection. Charlotte County has also been blessed over the years with appearances and art donations. The Charlotte County Libraries and History Archives is also home to original paintings by Willie Daniels and Robert Lewis, with a signed and dated print by Robert Butler. At its opening in 2005, the Mid-County Regional Library in Port Charlotte used the color palette of Robert Lewis's paintings to decorate the building's interior before its redesign a few years ago. He came to the library's dedication with artwork to display, as well as doing a program and exhibit at the Old Historical Center. Most of the original Florida Highwaymen have passed away, but some of them are still active artists today with their own galleries or museums. Before this video concludes, I'd like to present you with a brief slideshow of all the Florida Highwaymen artists and examples of their art. I hope it inspires you to learn more on these amazing artists.
The murals he had painted throughout this prison. And they all kind of looked at me and smiled, and they said, "Don't believe a word the man tells you." And they were not being malicious. They were kind of laughing at me, sneering a little bit. So I went to meet Al. We spent 3 hours together, and I walked out of there. I believed every word he told me, and I still do. This is an incredible ability to convince people. And he softens them up, and he made his money. And as Roger pointed out, it was 30%, but often he would charge double the amount for a painting, and he would keep the 30% plus everything over the money that the painters were entitled to. And they knew that, and it was fine with them. So he was living a life of luxury very quickly as well. And in this prison, he painted 94 murals, and I documented each of them for the book I wrote about Al's journey. And Roger had pointed out that he learned to paint by fixing the paintings. These were oil paintings on board, and these guys didn't have time to let the oils dry. They were painting them at night and taking them out the next morning, and they would nest in the frames. They made their own frames so they would nest, and one would not scratch or lean up against the one behind it because they were all wet. But inevitably, one would smudge or get scratched. And Al started to paint by fixing them up and taught himself the rudimentary techniques that they used. And then he went at it as a full-fledged painter. And but he's a legend. He's the most colorful of the highwaymen.
Gary and Roger, I was thinking from what you gentlemen have shared, I'm thinking of some friends of mine in the modern and contemporary art galleries who could probably learn some lessons from Mr. Black. I mean, selling artwork is an art unto itself. We had a question. I thought this would be good timing. I mean, other than, again, some are realistic, some are more impressionist style coastal oil paintings, what are some other characteristics of highwaymen paintings? Are they usually signed, for instance?
May I answer that quickly? Yes, they're all signed. Although Al Black told the painters for whom he was representing that if they didn't sign the painting, he can sign it in front of the prospective buyer to hasten the sale. So many paintings that Willie Daniels had painted are signed by Al Black. But any of us that look at their paintings long enough can tell you from across the room who painted which paintings. But generally, 99% were signed by the artist. And usually with a lot of flair. But to answer your question, I think what we call their fast painting define their style. And they painted so fast that the images are primarily very gestural, very sketchy, and hence very suggestive. I think by painting fast, they stripped away the artifice by which professional artists made their name in their paintings to arrive at the archetype, the essentialness of the scenes that they had painted. They weren't embellished. They weren't carried away. They just painted quickly to get the basics down. And they arrived at their own style by painting quickly. And yet, like Willie Daniels, who painted these pictures, was an incredibly gifted painter. And I think the most important in terms of exemplifying the highwayman aesthetic. It doesn't fall prey to professional paintings of the era. There's something, I don't want to say funky, but something just uniquely their own, that dreamy postcards sent to the tropics. And I think people can just walk into their paintings because they're not quite as pretentious as they might be if they were more belabored. And people just connected viscerally with these paintings. And I saw somebody had asked how many paintings. The estimates are between 200,000 and 250,000 oil paintings. It's a phenomenal number. Now, they didn't keep inventories or records, so nobody's sure exactly how many paintings were created. But I know that the number is rather high.
Gary, this is secondary to the craftsmanship and the talent. But what I think is so wonderful are that the paintings are a snapshot. It's like a time capsule of 1950s, 1960s Florida.
Yeah, you're so right, Charles. They captured that mid-century spirit. And I think a lot of it had to do with during World War II, Florida was a huge military training camp from Key West to Jacksonville to Pensacola to Tampa to Orlando. There could have been 2 million people stationed in Florida. And I'm from Miami Beach. I grew up in South Beach. And I've seen postcards and photographs of young men training on Ocean Drive. It's about a 14-block span on the beach in January without wearing shirts, but having a gas mask on their face, doing calisthenics. If you are fortunate enough to survive the horrors of war, what do you come back remembering? You remember this paradise that you were stationed in called Florida. And it's no wonder that Florida and Southern California became the places to live the American dream. And they would come down here and they might have been disillusioned when they found out about mosquitoes and cockroaches, but nevertheless, you hang one of these reports about the place and the incident I'm about to share with you. This was the place to be. It's Sunday night. There are 2 jukeboxes. Eddie's behind the bar, rolling his cigar from side to side. The place is packed with people smoking and enjoying the music and cavorting and spilling out onto the sidewalks. And this other man, Jules Funderburk, worked in the fields as a truck driver and came up to Alfred and Livingston Roberts, Alfred's good friend and one of the key painters. And they were sort of, respectful, but not paying too much attention. And they noticed that Funderburk is getting a bit hot under the collar. And I'm talking about a girl, because Alfred was movie star handsome and charismatic in the best sense of the word. And they're talking and playing, and Livingston doesn't know why Funderburk is getting edgy and says, "You want some money? Here's some money." He throws him some money. He goes, "I don't want your money." And he walks out and he walks back with a gun. And sadly, he hits Livingston with the gun and turns around and he shoots Alfred in the chest. And Alfred goes out the side and comes back, where they wrestled, comes back in and goes to the front where his car was parked. And he's rushed to the hospital. Everybody's in shock, of course, and he dies en route to the hospital. Alfred was 29 years old, on top of his game, and the father of 6.